Defenses and kickers heading into week 11. Chev, let's talk about the calls of the week. The Jets got you 31.75 points. Phenomenal call. In that same game, we also told you start the Browns, a solid 10.25. The Panthers, 6% rostered, we told you. They got you 10 points. Jason Myers, kicker, best kicker call that we had him on the show for a couple different weeks. Jason Myers gets you 15 points, 8 of 9 weeks with 8 or more points for Jason Myers. Over the last several weeks, too, we've shouted out Tyler Loop, be in the loop on him. His second 13-point performance in 3 weeks, and the Ravens seem to be clicking, and a lot of that is tied to Lamar Jackson. So if you have Loop, keep him. Go out and get him as well. Of note, bye weeks for next week, week 11, the Colts and the Saints. All right, our beloved Tyler Warren and Daniel Jones teams. You know, it's been tough. Michael Badgley had a very tough outing, but they get to rest up. But we don't have the Saints to pick on, unfortunately, this week. Want to shout out the Patriots. They're at home versus the Jets in week 11. Great spot to be in. However, they are highly rostered, and we've had plenty of success and enjoyment with them. Let's get to it. Texans defense at the Titans. They were our look-ahead defense last week, and you already got them. If we told you, currently over under 38.5. Texans are favored by 7.5 points. 75% on sleeper. So the angle we told you last week, 65% on sleeper. So there was 35% out there. So you've got 0.25%, 25% in a juicy matchup against the Titans. Remember, we had the Texans. We wanted them as your look ahead. There's that injury fallout, the Buymageddon. So this is simple. We're picking on the Titans until further notice. And the Texans have different totals of 13.5, 15.25, 13.5, 25.75, 10. And they actually hit double digits this week, despite the 29 points against them. Chev, tell us about the Chiefs.
The chefs and the reps, baby. We're back in business coming off the bye week against the Denver Broncos. And it's a 44.5 point over under, 3.5 point favorites for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now we are on the road. They're currently 25% rostered, 27% rostered on ESPN, 25% being on sleeper. We saw Broncos struggle at home against the Raiders. Now, part of that was due to some crazy wind conditions there, and the condition that the Broncos have of just having Bo Nix as their quarterback from time to time. And that's what we're going to take advantage of this week. So you've got the GOAT post bye in Andy Reid coming in, and Steve Spagnuolo, him and Andy Reid are just turning the screws on players, players and teams post bye more than you could ever imagine. So the Chiefs aren't going to give you the massive spike weeks potentially, but you can solidly count on 10 to 12. So they've already had 5 double-digit games. There's not very many safer plays with higher upside if they decide to, if the turnover bug does hit Bo Nix, then you're looking at a potential ceiling outcome, and that's possible this week. So why don't you tell us about your play for this week, brother?
A streamer alert here. We're streaming the Falcons defense versus the Panthers. 42.5 over under. The Falcons are favored by 3.5. 21% on ESPN rostership and 10% on sleeper are the Falcons. Incredibly, they gave up 31 points to the Colts and ended up with 6 points. How do you have positive points after giving up 31? We saw what Jonathan Taylor did. Remember, this Falcons defense is feisty. The Falcons are 6th in interceptions, 2nd in sacks to the Broncos with 29 are the Falcons. 11-point outings versus the Bills and the Patriots. That's very tough to do in this season. In the last time the Falcons and Panthers played, it was 30-0 Panthers. This game is going to be much different. Bryce Young has thrown for less than 200 yards in 8 out of 9 games. Chev, tell us why we should be on the LA Chargers.
Well, if you have an incredible memory, you remember that this is a perfect revenge spot for the only playoff appearance for Justin Herbert and the Chargers against the Jaguars a few years ago. But skipping forward to next week, it's a 44.5 point over under. Apparently, I get all the 44.5 point over unders for this week. The Chargers are 1.5 point road favorites. They're 47% rostered on ESPN, 37% rostered on sleeper. They've had 4 games with double digits and 5 games with 9 points. So they're the definition of a floor play, okay? But where the ceiling play comes in, cool cats and kittens, we're betting on Trevor Lawrence turning into an absolute pumpkin. So Lawrence cratered against the Texans, 5 sacks and an interception and a fumble recovery for a touchdown, 13 and a half fantasy points with 29 points given up. So Trevor Lawrence has turned back into an Easter Island statue of a head, and we're gonna get lucky. Okay, the Jaguars will have to get extremely lucky to get 29 points against the Chargers and Jesse Minter and that buzzsaw of a defense is getting healthier and healthier by the day. So why don't we pivot to our look ahead spot for this week and quote the Raven nevermore?
Hey, let's look ahead to the Ravens defense, home versus the Jets in week 12. 50% rostership on ESPN, 49% on Sleeper. So plenty of opportunity to go out and get the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, 2 games this season with 18.75 points. In the last 4 games, 11.5, 18.75, 7.75, and then 13.25 against those Vikings. So just an excellent run out for the Ravens, and they seem to be coming together, especially if Derrick Henry gets going on the run game. You get that run game correlation and the defense. You have a 50% rostership defense that's available out there heading into the next week against the Jets. You love to see it. Now let's hear from the Podfather about the DFS Dominator.
So let's put our hoodie on and let's talk about Player Profiler's DFS Dominator. It has a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Billy and Bradley and Evan and that Player Profiler AI engine to create cash game lineups that certainly have a high floor, but also give you that ceiling. Now, you've probably heard about the most powerful tool of all, our Lineup Genius. We know winning GPPs requires a completely different approach, which is why our Lineup Genius takes you through the process of selecting the quarterbacks in the juiciest matchups. Then it highlights the stacks and runbacks that are available, lets you pick the chalk level, lets you pick the level of correlation with a number of other proprietary settings available to you. Click a button and it generates hundreds of lineups to be imported into FanDuel and DraftKings. And it's just $45 a year, not a week, a year. So go fight fire with a Player Profiler DFS Dominator.
All right, Chev, we are on the Chiefs defense. Why should we be on their kicker, Harrison Butker?
Well, one, for his personal views about things, that's where the money's made. We're here to talk about his own personal beliefs. I'm kidding, but we're talking about Harrison Butker. This environment is perfect. Like the Broncos are one of the stingiest defenses in the red zone in the entire NFL, and he's 55% available coming off of bye week. So there's an opportunity here for either him to kick long field goals or him to kick a bunch of extra points if things go haywire. So 55% rostered on ESPN, 45% rostered on Sleeper. The bye week has caused a tremendous dip. This has been one of the most explosive offenses in the league. So the environment to kick in Denver is the best in the entire NFL. So we're talking about 5 of 9 games with at least 7 fantasy points. Again, I alluded to the fact that they're incredible on offense. And so we want as many pieces of the pie as we can get. And even though this is a less consequential piece of the pie, if he gives you 17 to 20 points, he gives you double-digit points, you're going to be really happy. So why don't you tell us about the little leg on Greg Little?
Hey, the little engine that could. Cam Little versus the Chargers, a 44.5 over under. Chargers are 1.5 point favorites. 6 of 9 games with 8 or more points is Cam Little. 33% rostered on Sleeper, 20% on ESPN. So you can absolutely go and get him. 15 points against the Raiders, and then 13 points against the Texans. There were jokes about Cam Little having to line up and do an 80-yard field goal just because the way things were going in that Jaguars-Texans game. We are playing the Chargers defense, but we loved the elements of stalled drives where Cam Little can come through. So we're anti-Trevor Lawrence next week, but that's where Cam Little comes in. Tell us about Evan McPherson.
Well, we've got, again, everything that I just said, take it from Kansas City, move it over to Cincinnati, home of the best chili on the planet, some say. But now we're cooking here with Evan McPherson in an environment with the Steelers. This is a 50.5 point over under because apparently the steel curtain is now the steel wool blanket or of some sort, or I don't know, maybe one of those really cool mesh shirts where you can see people's nipples and stuff. I don't know. But we're talking about a 20% rostered kicker on one of the most elite offenses with Joe, not Burrow, but Flacco at the helm. So 8% rostered on ESPN. So he's definitely available over there. Want to go grab him. And he's 13 to 16 on field goal attempts, 23 to 23 on extra points. They're off the bye. He's a set it and forget it kicker. As long as they have a quarterback with a pulse, this is what we need to be doing in more times than not. He's in that same ilk with Brandon Aubrey almost. Like one of the most accurate guys. So 17, 8, and 10 points, 17-point game was against the Steelers, ironically enough. So Joe Flacco has brought this offense back to life, and you need to take advantage. I'm going to take advantage in the spots where I don't have Cam Little or Chris Boumswell or Tyler Loop, who we've told you about. Look, we're cooking over here. So I'm going to get Evan McPherson in my lineup this week, and you should too.
Hey, week 11, defenses and kickers. Go out and get them. Go and win your week.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.